I've taken off-book jobs before. Small runs, easy cash, nothing that ever stayed with me longer than a night. This one didn't let go. The call came from a number I didn't know. The man didn't introduce himself. He just asked if I was still running south out of Texas. I said yes. He told me there was a container already loaded, short haul, cash when I delivered. I asked what was inside. He said it didn't matter. It was sealed. Then he told me the amount and I made the decision right there. I said yes. The pickup was outside El Paso, a dirt lot with one working light and a container already sitting on a chassis. No markings, no company name, nothing that tied it to anyone. 2 men were waiting. They didn't come close, didn't make conversation. One handed me paperwork that wouldn't pass a real inspection. The other one said very calmly that I wasn't to open the container. I asked what I was hauling. He looked at me for a second and said, "You don't want to know." That should have been enough. It wasn't. I hooked up, checked the lines, and climbed back into the cab. When I pulled out, one of the men rested his hand on the side of the container like he was listening through it. I remember thinking that was strange. I didn't stop. The road opened up into nothing, just highway and darkness. About 20 minutes in, I heard something from the trailer. A dull sound, not sharp, not loud, something shifting. I tightened my grip on the wheel and told myself it was cargo settling. That's normal. That happens. A few minutes later, I heard it again. This time it dragged slightly, like weight moving in a space too small for it. I turned the radio off, listened. Then I heard the knocking. Not fast, not desperate, just uneven, tired knocking from inside the container. I didn't pull over. I sat there driving, staring at the road, and I made a choice. I told myself it wasn't my problem. I told myself I didn't know what was inside, and I didn't want to. I told myself that opening it would only make things worse. The knocking came again, softer. I drove another mile and then it stopped, completely. That's when I felt it, not relief. Something heavier, like I had just missed the moment where I could have done something. I kept driving. I made it another 10 minutes before I couldn't stand it anymore. I took the next shoulder and stopped. The engine idled behind me while I sat there with my hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. I already knew. When I got out, the air felt too quiet. I walked to the back of the trailer slower than I should have, because I knew I was late. At the doors, I stopped and listened. There was breathing inside, but not like before, not as many, not as strong. I broke the seal and opened the doors. The heat hit me first, then the smell, then the silence between breaths. They were packed inside, women pressed together, holding themselves up or leaning on each other. Some still moving, some barely. One near the door looked at me, but her eyes didn't focus. She reached for me, and her hand didn't make it. I climbed inside and started pushing forward, trying to make space where there wasn't any. I checked the ones closest to me. Some responded, some didn't. Further in, there were bodies that hadn't moved at all. I found one near the floor. She was still warm, but she wasn't breathing. And I knew exactly when it had happened back on the road, when I heard the knocking, when I decided to keep driving. I backed out of the container and called 911. My voice didn't sound right. I gave them the highway marker, the direction, everything I could think of. Then I went back in and started pulling them out, one by one. Some could stand, some collapsed as soon as I touched them. One of the women grabbed my arm and held on with everything she had left. She said something in Spanish. I didn't understand all of it, but I understood enough. "You heard us." Not a question. I didn't answer. I kept pulling people out until the sirens came. 3 of them didn't make it. The police told me I did the right thing. They said I couldn't have known. They said it wouldn't have changed anything. They don't know about the knocking. I do. I don't take sealed loads anymore. Not for any amount. If I can't open it, I don't move it. But that's not the part that stays with me. It's what happened a week later. I was hauling an empty container. Clean, inspected, nothing inside, same kind of road, same kind of night, and then I heard it. Knocking, slow, uneven from inside the empty trailer. I didn't stop right away. I just kept driving, gripping the wheel, staring ahead, waiting for it to stop. It didn't. It got quieter. Like whatever was inside didn't have the strength anymore. I pulled over eventually, walked to the back, opened the doors, nothing there, just cold air. But standing there, I could hear breathing, weak, uneven. And this time, I didn't tell myself it was nothing, because now I know exactly what that sound means. I've been running the same overnight route for 9 years. Highway 20 between Vicksburg and Jackson. Flat, quiet, 2 lanes each direction. I know it the way you know a person. I could drive it half asleep. Last Tuesday, I almost had to. I'd loaded out of the Vicksburg terminal just before 11, 90 minutes from the distribution hub. Cold and clear, no traffic, radio on low, everything exactly the way it always is. Then my body started doing things I didn't tell it to do. It started with my hands, around the old grain elevator outside Edwards. Both hands tightened on the wheel without a decision being made. White knuckle for no reason I could see. Road empty, mirrors empty. I loosened my grip, kept driving. 3 minutes later, I couldn't swallow. My throat had gone so dry the cough I tried came out wrong. Thin, shallow, like something in me had already decided to be very quiet without consulting the rest of me. I checked the mirrors. Empty highway. Tree line on both sides, black against a clear sky. My mouth tasted like copper. I know that taste. Pure adrenaline. The kind that hits before your mind finishes processing whatever set it off. I'd felt it once before when a deer took me by surprise at 60 miles an hour. There was no deer. I was in a brightly lit cab on an empty highway, and my body was behaving like I was about to die. I pulled over. I sat on the shoulder with the hazards blinking, both hands flat on my thighs. The trailer behind me ticked in the cold, highway empty in both directions. A single car passed going south. Nothing else. I called dispatch, told them I was pulling a short rest stop. The woman said, okay, take my time. Slowly, over 4 or 5 minutes, the taste faded and my hands went back to normal. Fatigue, I decided. Something physiological. I pulled back onto the highway. For about 15 minutes, everything was fine. Then I heard it. A shift in the trailer. Not the tick of metal cooling, not the normal sway of the load on a curve. Something that moved and then stopped, weight redistributing. A single thump, low and deliberate, from the back left corner of the trailer where the pallets of produce were stacked. I turned the radio off, drove in silence, listening. Nothing for 30 seconds. Then it came again. 2 sounds, closer together. Like something finding its footing. I went through it logically. Pallets settle on long runs, straps loosen, things move. I knew this. My body didn't believe me. The copper taste was back, stronger. I called the after-hours safety line and told them I thought my load had shifted. The man said to pull into the way station 4 miles ahead. They'd have lighting. 4 miles. I drove those 4 miles with both hands on the wheel, eyes splitting time between the road and the mirrors, every part of me tuned to the back of that trailer. Nothing moved. The way station was lit and empty. I pulled in, set the brake, sat a moment with my hand on the door handle. I got out, walked the length of the trailer, put my hand on the rear door, listened. quiet. I cracked the door. Cold air rolled over my boots. Everything looked exactly as it should. One strap on the far left pallet had worked slightly loose, enough to let the load shift half an inch. That was the sound. I refastened it. Stood there a long moment in the cold air. Nothing else. I closed the door and climbed back into the cab. I was 3 miles from the hub when my phone rang. Unknown number, local area code. I answered it on the truck's speaker. A man's voice, unhurried. He said, "You should have kept driving." I said, "Who is this?" The line went dead. I hit the hub at just past 1 in the morning. The dock crew came out, started the unload. I stood by the cab and watched them open the trailer doors and work through the pallets on the forklift. On the third pass, the forklift operator stopped, got down, called the dock supervisor over. Behind the last pallet, the one with the loosened strap, there was a sleeping bag, food wrappers, an empty water bottle. A space carved out low and tight, invisible unless you pulled the pallet from the wall. It was still warm. The police came, took a report, pulled the gate camera from the Vicksburg terminal. A figure crossing the lot at 10:47, staying out of the light. They're still looking. I haven't driven that route since. I don't know if I'm going back. What I keep thinking about is the way station, the open door, standing there alone in the dark with all that cold air rolling over my boots, looking at the pallets and seeing nothing and feeling certain, absolutely certain, that I was not alone. I was right, I just didn't know where to look. I've been driving long haul for 11 years. You log enough miles alone and you stop being scared of the dark. The highway at 2 in the morning is just the highway. I want you to understand that, because what I'm about to tell you wasn't nerves, wasn't fatigue. 11 years, you know the difference. I was hauling a load of pipe fittings from Memphis to Baton Rouge, straight shot down Interstate 55. Left the terminal just after 9 at night, planned to fuel up outside Hammond, grab coffee, get back on the road. A run I'd done maybe 30 times. Somewhere past Grenada, my air freshener started swinging. Not the gentle tremor you get from road vibration. A slow, deliberate arc, side to side like something had just bumped it. The road ahead was flat and empty. I hadn't hit anything. I watched it for 3 seconds. It slowed, stopped. I turned the radio up. The truck stop outside Hammond was one of the big ones. Fuel islands, a diner, overnight parking slots along the back lot. I backed into a slot at just before midnight, killed the engine, climbed down, walked inside. Half-lit diner, a waitress behind the counter, one man in a booth eating eggs. I ordered coffee to go, stood at the register maybe 5 minutes. When I turned toward the door, I could see my truck through the glass. The cab light was on. I hadn't left it on. I turn it off every time. Ran the battery dead at a Tennessee rest stop 8 years ago, never made that mistake again. I was certain the cab was dark when I left it. It wasn't dark now. I walked back across the lot, told myself a short in the switch, told myself I'd been tired. The passenger door was unlocked. I had locked it. I opened it anyway. Nothing in the seat. My jacket folded on the dash where I'd left it. I climbed in on the driver's side and reached for the key. And then I smelled it. Not strong, low, specific. Dried sweat and something stale underneath, like a person who'd been sealed in a small space for hours. My cab doesn't smell like that. I sat very still. My hand was on the key and I didn't turn it. I looked at the sleeper curtain in the mirror. Closed, same as always, but I couldn't remember if the left edge had been touching the wall or hanging an inch off it when I'd pulled into the lot. The smell was still there. I grabbed the curtain and yanked it open. Empty. Bunk made. My bag in the corner, a paperback on the pillow. I'd left that book on the fold-down table, not the pillow. I leave it face down on the table every stop so I don't lose my page. 7 years, same habit. It was on the pillow. I got out of the truck without deciding to. 1 second I was in the seat, the next I was standing on cold asphalt with the engine running and the door hanging open behind me. My body knew before I did. I found the lot attendant, big man named Earl, orange vest, by the fuel islands. Told him I thought someone had been in my cab. He didn't argue, just said, "Show me." We checked the truck together. Earl was methodical, perimeter first, underneath, the storage boxes on the frame, then the cab, then the sleeper. He got down and checked under the bunk, nothing. He stood in the lot and said, "You want me to call the state police?" I said, yeah, get me the number." Officer Braddock arrived inside 40 minutes. She took my statement without skepticism, walked the truck herself, came back out and said 4 words that I've turned over every day since. Somebody was in there. She held up an evidence bag, a disposable lighter and a crumpled receipt from a gas station 3 days old. I don't smoke. I hadn't been to that station. I didn't know the town on the receipt. They brought a dog out. It tracked a scent to the far edge of the property to where the lot ended and the tree line started beyond the last row of parked trucks. Then the track went cold. No one was found. Officer Braddock called me 2 weeks later. The receipt traced back to a station in northern Mississippi. A surveillance photo from that station matched someone with an outstanding warrant. She said they were working on it. She hasn't called since. I had a secondary latch installed on the sleeper curtain. I check the bunk before every run before I even start the engine. I run that same stretch of road every few weeks, still do. But the thing I keep coming back to is the air freshener. Flat road, past midnight. No reason for it to move, except someone shifting their weight in the dark behind me. Someone settling in for the ride. 4.5 hours from Memphis, sitting behind that curtain while I drove. I don't know what they were waiting for. I don't usually run with the CB on. I find the chatter distracting after midnight. Lot lizard warnings, scale house updates, guys jawing about nothing for 100 miles. I keep it on 19 because that's where you leave it, volume near 0. That's why it took me a while to notice the voice. I was westbound on Interstate 40 out of Amarillo, the Panhandle at 2 in the morning. Flat black nothing in every direction. No lights, no exits. CB dialed just high enough to catch a scale house call. Otherwise, silence. Then a voice said my name, not my handle, my actual name, first and last. I turned the volume up. Static. The normal low hiss of an open channel. I sat there with my hand on the dial and waited, and for a long moment there was nothing, and I told myself I'd heard wrong. Road noise, a word that sounded like my name, the brain doing what it does at 2 in the morning on an empty highway. Then it came again. Same voice, flat, unhurried, the way you talk when you're not trying to convince anyone of anything. It said my name, and then it said, "Blue Pete's on your passenger side, been there since Amarillo." I looked. Nothing on the passenger side. I could see 300 yards of empty westbound lane, the shoulder, the wire fence at the edge of someone's cattle land, the dark beyond it. No truck, no lights. Blue Pete is CB slang for a Blue Peterbilt. I drive a Blue Peterbilt. My mouth went dry. I clicked the transmit button. Said, "Who is this? What channel are you on?" Standard. Calm. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Static. Then, "Check your glad hands before Tucumcari. Right side's been leaking since the Flying J." I had stopped at the Flying J outside Amarillo to top off and use the restroom. The glad hands are the airline couplings at the rear of the cab. Lose one and you lose trailer brake pressure. I hadn't checked mine since before Amarillo. I pulled over. I went around to the rear of the cab with my flashlight. The right glad hand had a hairline crack in the seal I'd missed in the dark at the terminal. Not catastrophic yet. Another hour on the highway and it would have been. I taped it, flagged it in my log, got back in the cab. I picked up the mic, said, "You just saved me a blowout. Who are you?" The voice came back after a pause, said, "I've been running 41 behind you." I looked in my mirrors. Empty highway, no headlights, no running lights, nothing. "I don't have a visual on you," I said. "No," the voice said. "You wouldn't." I put the truck back in gear. I kept the volume high and drove. Twice more in the next 40 miles, the voice came through. A coyote crossing a quarter-mile ahead, center lane, exactly where he said. Then a warning about the Tucumcari way station running all traffic through, which I confirmed on the DOT app before I reached it. Both times I checked my mirrors. Empty highway. I tried 17, 21, 9, nothing. He only came through on 19 and only when he chose to. Outside Tucumcari, I asked him how long he'd been back there. He said since before Amarillo. I asked him where he'd loaded out. He was quiet for a moment and then he said, "A place I knew, a smaller terminal, one I'd worked out of 8 years ago for about 14 months before I switched companies." I said, "I ran out of there back in the day." He said, "I know." I didn't ask how. I drove another 20 miles in silence and then I keyed the mic and asked the only question left that mattered. I said, "What's your name?" He came back immediately, said a name I recognized. A driver I'd known from that terminal. Good guy, ran the overnight desert roads, knew every way station from Albuquerque to Barstow. He'd died 6 years ago. Black ice on the Tijeras Pass, February, loaded flatbed. I'd gone to the service. I didn't transmit again. I drove to Albuquerque with the volume all the way up. Not another word on any channel. At the hub, I sat in the parking lot until the sun came up behind the Sandia Mountains. Pink, then orange, then ordinary blue. I've told this story twice. First person said I was tired, brain filling in gap, possible. Second said CB signals do strange things in the high desert, bounce off terrain, carry voices from distances they shouldn't, also possible. What I keep coming back to is the glad hand seal, a hairline crack in the dark at the rear of the cab that I had missed and that no one behind me could have seen without a flashlight and a reason to look. I carry his old handle in my contacts now. I don't know why. I've never transmitted to it. I don't know what I'd say.